Here is part 1 written in simple, natural English in a human-centric tone. It is crafted to be interesting, smooth, and safe for YouTube. The boy stood at the side of the stage, holding his hands together as if trying to keep them from shaking. He had been waiting for his turn for almost an hour, watching one performer after another walk up confidently, smiling and waving at the crowd. Each time someone finished, the room filled with claps, laughter, and bright energy. But the boy felt none of that inside himself. He only felt a tight knot in his stomach. He wore a simple shirt that had lost some of its color, and his shoes looked older than him. People had noticed. In places like community talent nights, where families came dressed nicely and performers tried to look their best, his appearance stood out. Not in a good way. A few people whispered when he first walked in. Some gave him quick glances, then looked away as if unsure what to think. He didn't blame them. He was used to that kind of attention. The boy kept staring at the piano on stage. It was big and shiny, the kind of instrument he had only seen up close a few times in his life. Every time he looked at it, a mix of excitement and fear rushed through him. He wanted to play it more than anything. He had imagined this moment so many times while practicing quietly at home. But standing here now, waiting to be called, the dream didn't feel as beautiful as the pictures he had in his head. It felt heavy, almost too big for him. A small group of teenagers sitting near the front row noticed him again. One of them nudged the other and giggled. The boy didn't hear what they said, but he knew it was about him. He'd heard words like that before, in school or on the streets near the market. Words about how he looked, how he dressed, how someone like him probably didn't belong in places like this. He tried to ignore it, but it still burned a little. He took a slow breath and reminded himself why he was here tonight. His mother had encouraged him to join the talent show. It wasn't because she wanted him to win anything. They both knew nothing about prizes or judges mattered to them. She just wanted him to be seen. She wanted the world to hear what she had heard for years, the sound of her child bringing life out of an old, cracked keyboard in their tiny living room. "You have something special," she had told him earlier that day, even if people don't know it at first. Her words stayed with him like a warm blanket wrapped around the cold. Feeling in his chest dot, the host continued reading names from a small list, his cheerful voice echoing through the hall. The boy could feel his moment getting closer. His heart beat harder, each thump loud in his ears. He tried to stand straight, but his body kept leaning a bit forward, as if he were preparing to run, except he had no intention of running away. Not anymore. He had spent years learning how to play music. Not in fancy classes, or with a teacher. He learned by watching videos from a slow internet connection, and by listening again and again to recordings he had found online. Every evening, after finishing his chores, he sat in front of his old keyboard. Some of the keys didn't even work, so he had to imagine their sound. But somehow, he kept going. He learned to feel music instead of just playing it. That feeling carried him here. A gentle tap on his shoulder startled him. It was the event volunteer telling him he was next. His throat tightened instantly. His palms grew warm and sweaty. He took a deep breath, and not a dot, he stepped forward, walking slowly toward the stage stairs. The lights grew brighter with every step, almost blinding him. As he climbed onto the stage, he could feel hundreds of eyes turning toward him. The hall wasn't huge, but it felt endless under those lights. A few soft chuckles reached his ears. He didn't look up to see who laughed. He didn't want to know dot to them. He probably looked like a kid who got lost or signed up by mistake. His clothes didn't help. Neither did his nervous steps. The host gave him an encouraging smile, but looked a bit unsure too, as if wondering whether the boy really meant to perform. The boy nodded politely and moved toward the piano. When he reached the instrument, He paused for a moment. The piano was more beautiful, up close. Its polished surface reflected the lights like a mirror. He gently placed his hand on the edge, as if greeting an old friend. He felt the smooth wood under his fingers and breathed out slowly. He tried to pull the bench forward. It was heavier than he expected, and for a second it made a scraping sound that echoed awkwardly across the room. More faint laughter followed. Someone in the back whispered something. His ears caught the tone, even if the words didn't reach him clearly. He kept his focus on the piano. If he looked at the audience now, his courage might break. He couldn't allow that dot. He sat down carefully, making sure his feet touched the ground properly. He straightened his back, the way he had seen real pianists do. His hands hovered above the keys, trembling just slightly. From where he sat, the room looked different. The bright lights hid the faces in the crowd, turning them into soft shadows. It was almost comforting. He closed his eyes for a moment, shutting everything out, the whispers, the chuckles, the doubts, the memories of people, assuming he wasn't capable of much. He let all of it fade away until there was only silence inside him. Then he remembered something his mother had said to him before he left home. You don't have to prove who you are to anyone. Just play from your heart. The right people will feel it. That memory softened the tension in his shoulders. He allowed one slow breath to fill his lungs. He knew what piece he was going to play. It was something he had worked on quietly for months, something he had shaped little by little, making mistakes and fixing them until it felt like his own voice. The room felt completely still now. A few audience members leaned slightly forward, curious to see what would happen. Some still wore playful smiles, expecting something simple or clumsy. The judges held their pens loosely, not expecting much dot. No one knew that the moment the boy's hands touched the keys, everything would change. But he knew, because this stage, this moment, was the first place where he wasn't going to hide his talent. This time, he would let the music speak for him, and he hoped, silently, that the world would finally listen. The hall was quiet in a way that felt strangely heavy, as if the whole room was waiting to see whether the boy would play a single note or simply freeze in fear. He sat there with his hands gently floating above the piano keys, breathing softly, trying to steady the shaking inside him. Every sound felt louder than usual. The faint buzz of the lights, a cough from somewhere in the back row, the rustling of someone's jacket. It all wrapped around him like a reminder that every pair of eyes in the room was pointed right at him. He knew they were watching. He could feel it, even without looking up. Some eyes were curious, some doubtful, some simply amused. A few audience members had already decided what kind of performance they were about to see. They expected something simple, maybe even a little funny. A poor kid sitting nervously at a grand piano didn't look like someone who could surprise them, but the boy wasn't thinking about them anymore. Not fully. His thoughts drifted back to earlier that week, when he sat on the edge of his bed practicing with his old keyboard. That keyboard had missing keys, broken buttons, and a sound that crackled if he pressed too hard. But to him, it was the most important thing he owned. He had learned every trick to make it work, every small adjustment needed to match the notes he heard in his mind. He remembered playing the same part over and over until his fingers felt numb. He remembered humming the tune while washing dishes. He remembered how the music always found a way to fill his home, even when nothing else did. That memory brought him warmth. It softened the fear in his chest. A small laugh floated from the front row again. The boy heard it this time. Someone whispered something like, "He looks too scared to play." The words weren't loud, but they reached him anyway. For a moment, his fingers hesitated across the keys, almost pulling back. He wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe he did look scared. Maybe he didn't belong here. But then he remembered why he had come. He had grown up hearing people tell him he couldn't do certain things. Not because they knew him well, but because of how he looked or where he came from. He had learned to stay quiet, to listen more than he spoke. But music was the one thing he didn't hide. Not truly. Even when he played alone, he let everything he felt flow into the sound. Music was the only place where he didn't feel small dot, so he pressed one. Key dot, just a very soft test note. The sound echoed beautifully across the hall. It surprised him, the way the piano responded so smoothly. He resisted the urge to smile. This instrument was nothing like the one he had at home. This one felt alive, that the small note drew a few small reactions from the audience. A couple of people straightened in their seats, as if realizing the boy actually planned to start now. A judge adjusted her glasses and leaned forward slightly. The boy let out a slow breath. He placed both hands on the keys, closed his eyes, and let his body settle. He had practiced the opening of his piece enough times to know it without thinking. His fingers began to move, very slowly at first, almost cautious. The notes came out smooth and gentle, like soft footsteps across a quiet room. At first, the audience didn't react much. They exchanged glances, waiting to see if he would mess up or play something too simple. But the boy didn't hear their doubts. Any more. He sank deeper into the music. The notes flowed from his hands in a pattern he had shaped with care. It wasn't a song most people would recognize. It wasn't taken from a famous composer or a popular movie. It was his own creation, something he had slowly built piece by piece during late nights when he couldn't sleep. He had poured every worry, every hope, every small moment of joy into the melody. As he played, he kept his eyes closed. Not because he was scared to look at the crowd, but because that was how he played when he wanted to feel the music clearly. The keys felt warm under his fingertips. The piano vibrated softly with each note, almost as if it were breathing with him. The audience began noticing something different. The boy's hands weren't clumsy. They weren't hesitant anymore. They moved with confidence, flowing from one note to the next with surprising smoothness. His posture changed too. He sat straighter, his shoulders relaxed, his face calm. The room slowly shifted. The murmurs stopped. The whispered jokes faded. Even the judges, who had been casually jotting notes earlier, now watched him with growing interest. The melody blossomed. He added gentle swells of sound, letting the piano rise and fall like waves. His fingers danced over the keys with a speed that didn't match the quiet, shabby boy they had seen walk onto the stage. The softness in the beginning grew stronger, richer. His left hand carried the deep, grounding rhythm, while his right hand painted delicate patterns over it. Someone in the audience gasped quietly. Someone else whispered, "Wait, he's actually good." But the boy didn't know any of that. He wasn't performing for applause. He wasn't thinking of impressing anyone. This moment wasn't about proving something. It was simply the one place where he felt free. He leaned slightly closer to the piano as the piece moved into the next part. The melody shifted, taking on a brighter tone. He let his hands move faster now, trusting the piano to follow his lead. The notes spilled into the room like a story being told without words. In the back row, a little girl stopped swinging her legs and stared quietly. A man lowered his phone, suddenly forgetting to check his messages. A woman who had been sipping water froze with the cup halfway to her mouth. The energy in the hall completely changed. The boy's music wrapped around the room, filling every corner. For the first time since stepping on stage, he felt truly calm. Not confident in a loud way, just comfortable. As if he belonged here more than anyone realized, he continued to play, letting the music guide him. He remembered the countless nights when he practiced until his fingers felt stiff. He remembered how hard he tried to make every transition smooth, every part emotional. Now, all that effort flowed out naturally. He didn't have to think anymore. His body simply remembered. A soft light from the ceiling reflected on the piano, making the keys shine beneath his hands. From the audience, it looked almost magical, the contrast of the old-looking boy and the beautiful, glowing instrument. A few people exchanged stunned glances. One whisper rose above the rest. Where did he learn to play like that? There was no answer. No one knew his story. No one knew how much he had practiced in silence, away from attention or praise. The judge with the glasses leaned even closer now. Her eyes widened slightly as she recognized the complexity of the piece. This wasn't something beginners or casual players could manage. There was skill here, real, undeniable skill. The boy's fingers moved into a part of the melody that had always been his favorite. It was soft, emotional, almost fragile. He played it with gentle pressure, letting the notes hang in the air before moving to the next. In those moments, the hall felt like a different world, quiet, peaceful, connected. The crowd didn't move. Not a single laugh now. Not a single whisper. Just silence. The boy didn't know how many people were staring at him with disbelief. He didn't know that some people who had judged him moments earlier now felt a little embarrassed. He didn't know that he had already captured the entire room. All he knew was the music. And for him, that was enough. The soft part of the melody faded gently, leading into the next section. His hands lifted for a heartbeat, then returned to the keys with a new burst of energy. The music brightened once again, full of motion and emotion. The boy played it beautifully. And for the first time that night, the audience wasn't laughing. They were listening. The moment the boy reached the middle of his piece, something shifted in the atmosphere of the hall. It wasn't loud or sudden. It was more like a quiet realization that passed through the audience one by one, a growing awareness that they were witnessing something they hadn't expected at all. The boy's hands moved across the piano, keys with a confidence that didn't match the shy kid who had walked onto the stage moments earlier. His music rose and fell like a living story, full of emotion, full of things he couldn't say with words. The notes swirled together, blending into patterns that filled every inch of the room. Some notes were bright and joyful, others soft and heavy with feeling. It was as if he was sharing pieces of his life through the music, letting the audience feel the things he had carried alone for so long. His eyes remained closed, not because he wanted to hide, but because he didn't need to see anything to play. The music guided him like a memory he knew by heart. As he continued, a warm light spread over the stage, highlighting the gentle movements of his arms and fingers. The grand piano responded beautifully to his touch, almost glowing as the sound grew richer. The audience sat frozen, afraid that even the smallest sound might break the moment. No one expected this. Not the judges. Not the families in the front rows. Not the teenagers who had chuckled when he walked up. And definitely not the people who had assumed he would play something simple. Every person who had looked at him with doubt now sat silently, eyes wide, their attention pulled in by the music. The judge with the glasses lowered her pen entirely. She wasn't thinking of scores or points anymore. She was simply listening, letting the sound wash over her. She had seen many performers that evening. Some were confident, some were skilled, some had practiced for years. But this boy's playing felt different. There was something raw and honest in every note, something that couldn't be faked or taught. A man in the back row blinked several times, as if trying to understand how someone so young could play with such depth. A woman beside him covered her mouth with her hand. She wasn't crying, but she felt something in her chest, a quiet pull, a feeling she couldn't describe. Even the teenagers who had laughed earlier were now leaning forward, their expressions changing from amusement to surprise. The boy's fingers slowed for a moment, letting the melody sink into a softer, almost tender theme. He pressed the keys with care, letting the sound stretch gently through the hall. Each note felt like a breath. Each pause felt like a heartbeat. In that stillness, The boy remembered the nights when he practiced alone. He remembered sitting on the floor of his living room when the keyboard stand broke. He remembered the dim light from the small lamp that flickered whenever the electricity dipped. He remembered the warmth of his mother's hand on his shoulder whenever she walked past and heard him play. Those memories brought him strength. They were the reason he didn't stop playing, even when his fingers hurt, even when he felt small in a world that didn't always make room for children like him. And now, here on this stage, he was sharing those years of quiet effort without even saying a word. The audience could feel it. They didn't know his past, but they felt his sincerity in the melody. Slowly, the soft part of the piece gave way to something deeper, something that rose like a wave. The boy's hands moved faster, his body leaning slightly into the motion. His posture changed again, his back straightened, his shoulders loosened. His fingers didn't just touch the keys. They commanded them. The room vibrated with sound. The melody grew in strength, lifting higher and higher until it filled every corner of the hall. The boy opened his eyes just a little, feeling the rush of the moment. The bright stage lights blurred softly around the edges, making it seem like he was playing in a dream. The music grew bold. The audience's eyes widened even more. They had never seen someone so young play like this. The speed of his fingers surprised even the judges. His hands moved in patterns that would challenge a trained pianist. Yet he didn't look strained or overwhelmed. If anything, he looked freer than he ever had. A man sitting near the aisle whispered, "This kid, he's something else." His voice carried a tone of disbelief. A woman in the second row shook her head slightly, murmuring, "How did we not see this in him?" Even the teenagers who had teased him earlier exchanged uncomfortable glances. They didn't laugh anymore. Their faces held something close to respect, or maybe guilt. The boy's music kept building, swirling into a rich crescendo. The notes layered over one another, forming a powerful, emotional wave that rose higher and higher. His hands blurred with motion, pressing keys with precision and passion. Then, just as the sound reached its highest point, it quieted. A sudden breath of silence filled the hall. The boy held his hands above the piano for a moment, letting the stillness settle. The silence was so deep that the audience could hear their own breathing. No one moved. No one dared to break the moment. He let the silence last just long enough. Then he began to play the final part. This section was softer, gentler, almost like a whisper after a storm. His fingers glided over the keys with a calm rhythm, each note falling like a soft drizzle after heavy rain. The melody carried a sense of quiet acceptance, a peaceful ending to the emotional journey he'd just taken them through. He played slowly, letting the sound breathe. Each note seemed to glow in the air before fading into the next. The audience leaned in without realizing they were doing it, drawn into the softness. The judge with the glasses let out a breath she had been holding. The man in the back sat completely still, not wanting to miss a single sound. A child in the front row rested her head on her mother's shoulder. Too relaxed to even blink. The boy felt the music settling inside him too. His fingers relaxed, his shoulders softened, his heartbeat steadied. He had poured everything into this performance, all the years of practice, all the quiet determination, all the feelings he could never say out loud. And now, he was reaching the end. The final notes drifted into the air like floating feathers. They lingered for a long moment, hanging over the hall as if refusing to disappear. When the sound finally faded, the boy lifted his hands away from the keys. Silence. Not. The kind of silence that comes from boredom or confusion. This was the kind of silence that comes after something powerful. Boy stayed still for a few seconds, unsure of what to do. He had played the last note, and now the world felt strangely quiet. His fingers hovered above his lap as he slowly lowered his hands. A tiny part of him wondered if he had done something wrong, if the audience didn't know how to react. But then he heard a single clap, just one, then another dot, then three, and then, in the blink of an eye, the entire hall erupted into applause. The boy blinked in surprise. The sound washed over him like a wave, loud, warm, full of life. People stood from their seats without thinking. The applause grew even louder, echoing against the walls. Some audience members cheered. Others whistled. A few simply clapped with both hands held tightly, as if trying to push all their admiration into the sound. The boy stared out at the sea of people, barely able to believe it. Their faces were bright with excitement. Their expressions were full of shock, pride, amazement. Even the teenagers who had laughed earlier were clapping now, their expressions soft and sincere. The judges rose from their seats. The judge, with the glasses, clapped the hardest, her eyes shining with something close to astonishment. The boy's heart pounded, but not with fear this time, with joy, with relief, with pride he had never let himself feel before. He stood slowly from the bench, unsure if his legs would hold him. The applause didn't stop. It only grew louder. People kept standing. Some waved at him. Some nodded with respect. Some simply looked at him as if they had witnessed something unforgettable. He didn't smile widely, but a small, shy smile formed at the corner of his lips. For the first time in his life, he felt seen, truly seen, and he had done it with nothing but his music. The night settled over the camp like a quiet blanket, but there was nothing peaceful in the air. Everyone moved with a strange mix of hope and fear, trying to understand the strange shift that had happened after the performance. The boy sat alone near the dying fire, his hands still tingling from the final notes he had played. He kept replaying the moment in his mind, wondering how everything could change so suddenly. The millionaire had stepped away after the performance, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the boy thought he had done something wrong, or maybe he had crossed a line he didn't understand. But then he remembered the look in the man's eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was something else, something he couldn't quite name. Maybe surprise. Maybe respect. Maybe even guilt. He pulled his knees close and rested his chin on them. The camp was quiet. The crew had gone back to their tasks, whispering among themselves, stealing quick glances at him when they thought he wasn't looking. Before tonight, he had been invisible to them. Just another quiet helper, someone to move things, carry things, disappear into the background. But now the hush in their voices felt different. They weren't ignoring him anymore. They were watching. A light crunch of footsteps made him lift his head. One of the older crew members approached slowly, as if unsure whether he should come closer. He cleared his throat once and gave a small smile. "That was something special," the man said softly. "I don't think anyone expected it." The boy didn't know what to say. He nodded once, his fingers absently curling as if they remembered the keys. "You've got a real gift," the man continued. "Not just talent, heart, that matters more than anything." The boy wasn't used to compliments. He didn't trust them easily. But the man's voice held something sincere, something gentle. He looked away, unsure how to respond. The man didn't push for more. He simply nodded and stepped back. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, "remember this. No one can take away what you did tonight." When the man walked off, the boy felt a strange warmth settle in him. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen. Not judged, not pitied. Just seen. He wrapped his arms tighter around his legs and stared at the fire. He thought about all the times he had played alone, hoping someone would stop and listen. All the times he had been ignored, or brushed aside, or told that dreams like his were useless. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a door had finally cracked open. Before he could follow the thought further, he heard another set of footsteps, softer, slower. When he looked up, he felt his breath freeze. The millionaire stood a few feet away, hands tucked in his pockets, watching him quietly. The boy sat up straighter, unsure what the man wanted. His heart thumped nervously in his chest. "May I sit?" The millionaire asked. The boy hesitated, then nodded. The man lowered himself onto a wooden crate beside the fire. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The crackling of the burnt logs filled the silence. "You surprised me tonight," the man finally said, his voice low. "I didn't expect that from you." The boy swallowed. He didn't know what he was allowed to say, or what the man wanted to hear. "Do you know why I challenged you earlier?" the man asked. The boy shook his head. "Because sometimes," the man said, "I forget that people can be more than what they appear. I assumed you were just another quiet kid running errands. I didn't see anything else. And that was my mistake." The boy lowered his gaze to the dirt. His chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of being misunderstood for so long. "When you sat at that piano," the millionaire said, "you didn't just play. You showed something I haven't heard in years. Honesty, emotion, truth. That's rare." The boy looked at him then, surprised by the softness in the man's tone. "Music like that," the man continued, "only comes from someone who has lived through more than he says. Someone who carries things quietly." The boy's throat tightened. He blinked, trying to steady himself. The millionaire leaned back slightly, eyes still on the fire. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The boy hesitated. His voice came out small. "I didn't learn from anyone. I just played. I listened. And I kept trying." The man nodded slowly, as if he expected that answer. Sometimes the best ones come from nowhere. They sat in silence again, but this time it felt calmer, less uncertain. After several moments, the millionaire spoke again. "I didn't treat you fairly today. I see that now, and I want to make it right." The boy blinked, unsure he heard correctly. "Tomorrow," the man said, "there's going to be another event, bigger, more important. I want you to play there. Not as a challenge, not as a test, as the main performer." The boy's eyes widened. His breath caught in his chest. "Only if you want to," the man added. The boy stared at him, stunned. The idea of playing in front of so many people terrified him, but at the same time, it lit something bright inside him. Something he had never felt before. Something like possibility. "Why me?" the boy finally whispered. The millionaire turned his head slightly and met the boy's eyes. "Because you earned it." The boy didn't speak. He couldn't. His throat felt too tight, his mind too full. He had never been offered anything like this. Never been trusted, never been chosen. He didn't know whether to believe it or not. "If you decide yes," the man said gently, "we'll prepare in the morning, and I'll make sure everything is set for you. But this has to be your choice, not mine." The boy looked down at his hands. They trembled slightly. He rubbed them together, trying to find courage. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe the crowd would laugh again. Maybe he would make mistakes. Maybe people would doubt him. But tonight, he had shown something real. And for once, people listened. He lifted his head slowly. The firelight reflected in his eyes. "I'll do it," he whispered. The millionaire smiled, not arrogantly this time, not proudly, but warmly. "Good," he said. "Then tomorrow, we show them who you are." He stood, gave the boy a small nod, and walked away. The boy watched him go. His heart raced, not with fear, but with a rising excitement he didn't know how to contain. Tomorrow would be bigger than anything he had ever done. It terrified him, but it also pulled him forward with a strength he couldn't resist. He turned back toward the fire. The flames were small now, almost gone. But they still glowed, stubborn and bright. He felt the same way. He closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. He didn't have the finest clothes or the best training or a name that anyone recognized. But he had something else, something he couldn't explain, something that lived in him every time he touched the keys. And tomorrow, he was finally going to let the world hear it. The night grew colder, but the boy felt strangely warm. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about everything he lacked. He was thinking about everything he could become. The fire cracked softly as it died down, and he stayed there until the embers turned dim. He wasn't scared anymore. He wasn't alone. Not tonight, not tomorrow was coming. And he was ready. The hall felt different as the boy stood there, breathing slowly while the last note of his song still floated in the air. For a moment, he did not move. He was not sure if he should bow, step back, or simply wait. His hands were shaking a little, not from fear now, but from the overwhelming rush of everything he had just done. He had poured out all the practice, all the long nights, all the hope he had kept in his heart for years. And now the whole room was looking at him. For a few seconds, the silence was so deep that he could hear his own heartbeat. Then someone in the back started clapping. It was one person at first, then two, and then the whole crowd joined in. The applause grew so loud that it felt like the entire hall was shaking. People stood up from their seats, cheering in a way he had never heard before. Some were calling out words he could not fully understand over the noise, but he knew they were good words. He could tell from the bright faces, the smiles, the way they looked at him with a kind of respect he had never felt from strangers. The boy slowly stepped back from the piano and gave a small bow. He had seen other performers do it at events he watched online, and he tried to copy the gesture. But when he lifted his head again, the applause had only grown. It felt unreal. A few minutes ago, most of these people had been laughing softly, whispering doubts, wondering what a kid like him was doing on that stage. And now all of them were standing, cheering, and almost looking proud of him. The host walked onto the stage with wide eyes and a smile that showed pure surprise. Even he seemed unsure what to say. He moved close to the boy, whispered something like, "That was incredible," and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder as he gently guided him toward the front of the stage so everyone could see him better. The boy took one more small bow, but it felt strange because people were still clapping without slowing down. Some audience members had even taken out their phones, recording him the whole time. He tried not to think about it too much. He had never been recorded before, at least not like this. Part of him felt shy, but another part felt like something big had changed. Something inside him felt lighter, almost as if all the doubts he carried for years were melting away. After a long moment, the applause finally softened enough for voices to be heard again. The host raised his hand, signaling for quiet. People took their seats slowly, many still buzzing with excitement. The host asked the boy a few soft questions about how long he had been playing and who taught him. The boy gave honest answers, in a gentle voice, telling them he didn't have a real teacher and mostly learned through videos, old books, and whatever he could find. Some people gasped softly when they heard this. Others looked at each other with amazement. Down in the front row, a woman who had been quiet throughout the night stood up and approached the stage. She was slightly older than most people in the room and carried a small notebook. Her steps were slow but steady. The boy noticed her because the host paused when he saw her walking closer. She reached the edge of the stage, smiled at the boy, and spoke in a calm voice. She introduced herself as someone who trained young musicians and helped them get scholarships. She said she had come only to observe the show, not expecting anything special, but what she heard from the boy had moved her deeply. She said his playing was raw, real, and full of emotion, something she rarely saw, even in students who trained for years under professional teachers. The boy felt his heart race again as she continued speaking kindly. She said she wanted to help him if he was willing. She offered to mentor him, guide him, and help him reach places he never thought possible. The crowd murmured with excitement. People seemed genuinely happy for him. The boy's eyes widened. He had never imagined someone would offer such a thing to him. He didn't know what to say at first. He looked down at his hands, then back at the woman, and nodded shyly. The room filled with soft applause again, not as loud as before, but warm and encouraging. After the event ended, many people came up to him. Some wanted to shake his hand. Some wanted to tell him how wonderful his performance was. Others shared that his music had touched them in ways they could not explain. He listened quietly, grateful but still overwhelmed. Outside the hall, the air was cool, and the evening sky was turning darker. Small groups of people still talked excitedly near the entrance, many still discussing the boy's performance. He stepped outside slowly, feeling tired but happy in a way he had never felt before. His mother, who had been sitting quietly in the back the whole time, came to him with tears in her eyes. She hugged him tightly, holding him for a long moment. She told him she always believed he had something special, even when the world did not see it. She said she was proud of him, truly proud, and that today he showed everyone what she had always known. The boy listened quietly, his heart swelling with comfort and relief. For years, he had played on an old keyboard with a few broken keys. For years, he had dreamed but never believed those dreams could be real. And now, after one night, everything felt different. As they walked home together, the boy kept thinking about the stage, the piano, the applause, and the woman who offered to help him. He wondered how his life might change. He wondered if this was the beginning of something new. But the strongest feeling inside him was simple. He felt seen. For the first time, he felt that people looked at him not with doubt, not with judgment, but with respect and admiration. He reached home, sat gently on the edge of his bed, and let everything sink in. He thought about the way his fingers had moved across the keys, the way the room had fallen silent, the way people had stood up for him. He smiled softly to himself. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more practice, and more moments of uncertainty. But now he also knew something else. He could do it. He had found courage, not from being confident at first, but from stepping onto a stage even when everyone doubted him. And that courage had carried him further than he ever expected. As he lay down to rest, he whispered to himself that no matter how tough things got, he would keep moving forward. He would keep playing. He would keep dreaming. And maybe, one day, the whole world would hear him. For now, though, he closed his eyes and thought about the applause he never imagined would be for him. It echoed softly in his memory, warm and steady, as he drifted into a peaceful sleep, knowing his life had just changed forever.